What if I told you your biggest problem isn't failure, money, or time, but a mind so full it's slowly destroying your peace? And what you're about to hear might make you uncomfortable, because once you realize it, you can't go back. The mind was never meant to be this loud. Every morning, before the sun fully rose, a young man lay awake. Not because he wanted to, but because his thoughts refused to let him sleep. Regrets from yesterday, fear about tomorrow, comparisons that crept in silently, expectations he never agreed to, yet carried every day. His mind felt like a crowded room where everyone was talking at once, and no one was listening. He wasn't failing in life, at least not on the outside. He had a job. He paid his bills. He smiled when required. But inside, his head was always heavy. Every decision felt exhausting. Every mistake replayed like a broken record. Even moments of silence were filled with noise. He believed thinking more would solve his problems. Instead, it trapped him. The more he thought, the more confused he became. The more he planned, the more anxious he felt. His mind jumped constantly, past to future, future to past, never staying where his body was. One evening, after another mentally draining day, young man sat alone on his balcony. The city buzzed below him, horns, lights, endless movement, and suddenly it hit him. My life feels exactly like this city, always moving, never resting. That night, for the first time, he asked a dangerous question. What if my problem isn't lack of effort, but a mind that never shuts up? He realized something uncomfortable. His mind wasn't tired because he worked too hard. It was tired because it was carrying too much. Old memories, other people's opinions, self-doubt, fear of failure, fear of being judged, fear of being left behind. He had never learned how to let go, only had how to hold on. We are taught to fill our minds with information, goals, motivation, pressure. But no one teaches us how to empty it. No one tells us that clarity doesn't come from adding more thoughts, but from removing unnecessary ones. That night, young man made a quiet decision. He didn't know how yet, but he knew one thing clearly. If he didn't learn to empty his mind, it would slowly empty his life of peace. And this realization was only the beginning. But what happens when you actually try to empty your mind and realize how addicted you are to the noise? That's where the real struggle begins. When he first tried to quiet his thoughts, it felt impossible. He sat still, closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and within seconds, his mind exploded. To-do lists, awkward conversations from years ago, imaginary future failures, random fears with no names. It was chaos. He opened his eyes, frustrated. Why can't I stop thinking? He wondered. That's when he understood something important. We fear an empty mind because we confuse silence with loss of control. Thinking feels productive. Overthinking feels responsible. Worry feels like preparation. But most of the time, it's just noise pretending to be importance. Young man realized he had built his identity around thinking. If he wasn't thinking, planning, worrying, then who was he? The truth was uncomfortable. An empty mind felt unsafe. Because in silence, there's nothing to hide behind. No distractions, no excuses. Just you. And that scared him. We cling to thoughts the same way we cling to clutter in a messy room. Even when it suffocates us, we tell ourselves, I might need this someday. But peace doesn't come from control. It comes from release. Slowly, he stopped fighting his thoughts. He stopped trying to force silence Instead, he began observing. A thought would come, and instead of following it, he let it pass. Another thought appeared, and he didn't judge it. He just watched. For the first time, he noticed something powerful. Thoughts lose strength when you don't engage with them. They come, they go. The mind is like a river. You don't stop the water by jumping into it. You step aside and let it flow. As days passed, small gaps appeared between his thoughts, tiny moments of stillness. And in those moments, something unexpected happened. He felt lighter, not happier, not motivated, just lighter. And that lightness felt unfamiliar, but peaceful. He realized he didn't need to control every outcome. He didn't need to solve his entire life in his head. Some things could be left unanswered. Emptying the mind wasn't about becoming blank. It was about creating space. Space to breathe. Space to choose. Space to live. But this calm didn't last forever, because once the mind starts to empty, it brings up the one thing you've been avoiding. What happens when silence forces you to face yourself? Without distractions, without excuses? That's when the deepest transformation begins. Silence is honest. When his mind began to quiet, emotions he had buried for years started to surface. Sadness without a clear reason. Guilt he never processed. Fear he kept postponing. At first, he wanted the noise back. At least noise distracted him. But silence doesn't distract. It reveals. He understood then, emptying the mind isn't relaxing at first. It's uncomfortable. Because when the noise fades, the truth speaks. And the truth doesn't shout. It whispers. In those quiet moments, he saw how harshly he spoke to himself. How often he lived in comparison. How rarely he was present in his own life. He realized his mind wasn't his enemy. It was overworked, overloaded, overused. So he changed his approach. Instead of asking, "What should I think?" he asked, "What can I let go of?" He let go of the need to impress. He let go of replaying old mistakes. He let go of imaginary futures that stole today's peace. Emptying the mind didn't make his problems disappear, but it changed how heavy they felt. Problems remained, but panic didn't. He started responding instead of reacting, listening instead of assuming, acting instead of overthinking. And slowly, life felt clearer. Not because it was easier, but because his mind wasn't cluttered. He learned this powerful truth. A calm mind sees solutions a busy mind misses. For the first time in years, he felt present while walking, eating, breathing. Life wasn't rushing past him anymore. He was finally there to experience it. But the journey wasn't over, because emptying the mind is not a one-time act. It's a daily practice. And the final lesson would change how he lived forever. So what happens when an empty mind becomes your strength, not your escape? That's where true freedom begins. An empty mind is not weak. It doesn't mean you stop thinking. It means you choose when to think. He discovered that clarity isn't loud, confidence isn't rushed, and peace doesn't need explanation. With a quieter mind, his focus sharpened. He worked better, spoke less but meant more, listened deeply, chose carefully. He wasn't controlled by every emotion anymore. He felt them, then let them pass. Life still challenged him, but it no longer overwhelmed him. He understood that an empty mind creates space for intuition, creativity, and wisdom. When the noise fades, the right thoughts rise. And that is the real power. You don't need more motivation. You don't need more information. You don't need to think harder. You need to think less and live more. Empty your mind of what doesn't serve you and fill your life with what truly matters. Because when the mind is clear, the path becomes visible and peace finally feels possible.